Get your ears wrapped around the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast. All the scoop you need to know, from college basketball to the NBA and even March Madness. News of your rising stars, topics on and off the hardwood. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast.
Thank you for tuning into the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Steven Melendez, and I'm going to be bringing you the latest and greatest in basketball news from around the NBA. Welcome back, everyone, to your favorite basketball podcast. We've got a lot to get into in today's show. I'm happy to be here with you guys once again. I'm loving talking about basketball. And I hope you guys are enjoying what I'm bringing to you guys. My analysis, just everything I'm talking about, because I feel like I know a good amount about NBA. But of course, you guys be the judge. You let me know in the comments what you guys think about me so far. I really want to know. But regardless, we got a bunch of things to talk about. I want to get into, primarily in this show, I want to get into how these new acquisitions during the trade deadline or the buyout market are performing on their new teams. I know some haven't actually officially started with them, like George Hill for the Philadelphia 76ers. He's still injured with like a thumb injury, and he hasn't played for them. But for the ones who have, I want to get into, how they look on the team, what I feel it's going to really do for them in the long run, whether it's playoffs, whether it's title contention, whatever. So let's just do a little rundown about what we're going to be discussing in today's show. First segment, I want to talk about LaMarcus Aldridge and Blake Griffin joining the Nets. Just talk about, what they bring to that team. I'm going to discuss about Vucevic joining the Bulls. And lastly, I'm going to talk about PJ Tucker joining the Bucks. Because those are really, three. There's more coming up, but those are, the three that I want to talk about there. I guess those are like the big men that I get to talk about. Second segment, we're going to be talking about Victor Oladipo and Aaron Gordon joining their new teams for the playoff pushes. Again, talking about what they bring to the team. I'm loving what I'm seeing from both of them. Of course, one had a better debut than the other, but we're going to get into that in that second segment. And then I'm also going to discuss how it's going for that Powell and Gary Trent Jr. swap. Just going to do a little analysis on, how each team is doing with their new acquisitions. And, what we're seeing from there. And then in the third segment, I'm going to be changing it up. I want to talk about the Jazz, the Utah Jazz. They're lighting up the NBA right now. They have been all season, and they had hit a little bit of a slow stretch, but they seem to have picked it up again. And I want to talk about, are the Jazz serious title contenders? Like, are people really expecting them to go up against the Clippers, the Lakers, the Denver Nuggets, and beating them in a 7-game series and going to the finals? So we're going to get into that in the third segment. And then, of course, the fourth and final segment of the show, we're going to be talking about about the top 10 centers in the NBA this season. Another list that I think is extremely stacked. I mean, of course, it's the NBA. We got the best players in the world here. We got some MVP candidates. We got some up-and-coming young players. So get ready for that. But yeah, let's get started with that first segment of LaMarcus Aldridge, Blake Griffin, Vucevic, PJ Tucker. I first, of course, want to talk about LaMarcus Aldridge and Blake Griffin joining this super team in Brooklyn. You look at that team from before they even joined. You got the three-headed monster of James Harden, Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, probably the best offensive trio in league history. I don't even think it should be an argument. Like, with what these guys have done in their careers, they are the best offensive trio in league history. I've already said that. Now you add Joe Harris, who is averaging 48.5% from the 3-point line on about 7 attempts. Ridiculous. You add that to that. You got Jeff Green in there, Bruce Bowen. Obviously, man, if Spencer Dinwiddie was healthy on this team, that wouldn't even be fair. They'd have a big point guard off the bench. But regardless, they got Landry Shamet playing a bit, Lawawu Cabarro, but now, and Nicholas Claxton, who was injured early on in the season, and also Tyler Johnson playing a bit, averaging, like 38% from the 3-point line. Not bad. But obviously those are the lower pieces, the role players. But now you add LaMarcus Aldridge and I forgot to mention DeAndre Jordan. I don't know. And did I mention Jeff Green? Maybe I didn't. But regardless, now you got LaMarcus Aldridge and you got Blake Griffin, two big guys who have been stars in this league. Obviously both, LaMarcus Aldridge more because he's 35. You got Blake Griffin, who's 31, so still technically towards the back end of his prime, but he's fallen off in a big way. At least he was on the Pistons, because the Pistons are garbage, to be nice about it, and they were asking him to do a lot, because that's what they need from a Blake Griffin when your best player on the team is Jeremy Grant, and there's no slight on him. Jeremy Grant has been playing great this season, but realistically, you're going to expect Blake Griffin to do a lot of things for you, and he couldn't. At the same time, he looked uninterested because obviously they're a rebuilding team, and it was just a failed experiment there. So he didn't look interested. So people were calling him washed, which, yes, compared to his Lob City days, he's not the same. Obviously, he's nowhere near that type of Blake Griffin, but he's not a 36-year-old near the end of his career. I mean, the man's still 31. Like I said, back end of his prime. So joining a team like this, who's going to give him a lot more motivation to be at the top of his game, and actually, now he's going to have the space to playing alongside guys like KD, Harden, Irving, Joe Harris. He's going to get so many opportunities to cut to the basket and make plays, because that's what Blake Griffin does. And it doesn't even mean just dunking, although he's been doing a lot of that. A lot of people didn't expect him to dunk anymore, but he's doing a lot of that. But also the passing, his ability to also stretch the floor, because on this team right now, he's averaging... it's not going to sustain. He's at 55% from the 3-point line on about 2 attempts a game, which in 5 games, that's not bad. I mean, are you kidding me? If I get anybody on the Heat that's averaging, 55, which technically at the moment, Duncan Robinson is doing that, but we're getting off topic. The fact that he can do that while also playing some pretty decent defense, because he's still, athletic enough to stay in front of most power forwards and obviously centers, and he's a strong guy. You give him the motivation, and you're going to get a very good role player. I mean, are you kidding me? He's one of the best role players in the league, in my opinion, with the different skill sets that he has. You don't have a lot of teams bringing guys off the bench that can do as many things as Blake Griffin can do at that front court position. So it's just, it really is an eye-opener when you see him join this team off the buyout market. And I'm not one of those guys that's like, oh, shame on you, there's no competition. I mean, it sucks, especially since the Heat were one of the guys that were eyeing him, especially LaMarcus Aldridge. When I get to him, it's going to, that one hurt even more, because the amount of talk about him possibly joining the Heat, him eyeing the Heat, he's expected to join the Heat when he clears waivers, and then he changes his mind because the Heat go on a 6-game losing streak, and obviously, he wants to win a championship. He's 35 years old, and you see what he did in that first game. It's just, it hurts. But back to Blake Griffin, he can do so many different things in that role-playing role, because he's not going to be playing. He's not going to be starting. A front court matchup of KD and Blake Griffin, I just don't like it. With LaMarcus Aldridge, I can definitely see it a lot more, even though he is older, so maybe they won't be able to play him that many minutes. He played 30 minutes his first game. I don't expect that to be a regular thing. If it is, then I mean, all the best, but I don't think that's going to last going into the playoffs. Furthermore, what Blake Griffin's been able to do, he's averaging, 8.6 points, 4.5 rebounds, 2.2 assists, a steal, and half a block a game. So, on pretty solid averages. So the guy is doing, a little bit of everything. You're going to see him, continue to play at a comfortable level once he gets used to the system. And I think Blake Griffin's going to be a huge asset to this team going into the playoffs. Because just you always want guys that can either shoot the three, defend, or make that extra, like make the pass or make that next move once you're closed out on. And Blake Griffin can do all those things. And when you talk about the team that he's around, it's like I can't say it enough. Like being surrounded by those, offensive juggernauts is going to do wonders for Blake Griffin and for this Brooklyn Nets team. And that's why they're considered favorites to win the title this year, because they got so many options. And, and now talking about LaMarcus Aldridge, it's like, having a guy that, you can just give it to the post in, and you can't double team him at any point because just think about a lineup of Kyrie Irving, Harden, KD, Joe Harris, and LaMarcus Aldridge. Why would you double team LaMarcus Aldridge? I mean, he's going to go to work in the post, so I understand sometimes you got to get the ball out of his way, but he is a good passer for a big. These two guys are very good passers for bigs, which means the ball's not going to stay stuck. People are saying, oh, he's an ISO player. I mean, he really isn't. He can pick and pop, and there's so many, every single guy on that team can run the pick and roll. I'm saying of the superstars. So, you got to pick your poison. And, of course, everyone's most likely going to choose, let LaMarcus Aldridge shoot a wide-open mid-range. We'd rather double-team KD, Harden, or Irving, which is understandable. But then you're leaving a guy who, throughout his entire career, has been nailing mid-ranges. That's his bread and butter. So this is just, in my opinion, I feel like the LaMarcus Aldridge ad is going to be so much more efficient for this team, so much better, because it opens up so many things. And I understand DeAndre Jordan's been starting for most of this season. He's got 36 starts in his 46 games, but I just don't like what he brings to this team. He's not, he averages, I think it's 1.2 blocks a game, but in my opinion, he's not a great rim protector anymore. And he really wasn't that great even in his prime, in those Lob City days. He was more of a high flyer, someone who matched up well with Blake Griffin because he was a decent passer, but he's not really that anymore. And you can't really rely on him to shoot free throws at the end of the game, so if he gets fouled in the paint, you're pretty much losing possessions there. So I don't expect DeAndre Jordan to be a major part of this rotation once they go into the playoffs. Of course, to give LaMarcus Aldridge, Blake Griffin, Jeff Green some rest for sure. And of course, KD and Irving wanted Jordan there. So I understand, he's got to be a part of it somehow, but I just don't think he's going to be playing those last minutes of a fourth quarter for the Brooklyn Nets. It just wouldn't make any sense because he doesn't do those few things that they need him to do well enough. He doesn't rebound the ball like he used to. He averages, about 7 rebounds a game? Yeah, 7 rebounds a game. His shot blocking, 1.2, but I mean, that's not even the best on his team. Kevin Durant, even though, yes, he hasn't played that much this season, is averaging almost a block and a half a game. Nicholas Claxton is over him, so I even like Nicholas Claxton's defense in the post or in the paint more than DeAndre Jordan's. And in the end, adding LaMarcus Aldridge to that starting lineup is going to unlock so many things for that team because it's just another shooter you put out there. I mean, he can shoot the 3 ball as well. And then you just look at that debut he had. It just makes me just hurt inside because of how well he would have matched up or how well he would have paired in that front court with Bam Adebayo to be able to go out to that 3-point line and shoot. His passing ability. I mean, there were so many times he got the ball in the post. The Charlotte Hornets would go out to double team him, and he would make the easy pass out to Irving, and then it would just go, pass, rotate, all the way around to the other side of the court for an open 3. And it's just incredible that they were able to get him. And it's not unfathomable because, of course, his team is considered a favorite for, the title this year. And, of course, a lot of veterans are going to want to go there. But it's just crazy what he adds. He almost got a double-double. He even had 9 rebounds. So he even adds, so I don't think he's going to be averaging, 10-plus rebounds for this team. I don't expect that at all because he just doesn't have that same type of athleticism. But he does have a lot of length inside. So in terms of defense, I don't think they're really going to lose that much going to LaMarcus Aldridge instead of DeAndre Jordan. And on top of that, You add KD to this, because KD's been out this whole season, like most of it. I mean, he's played like 20-something games. You add him, he has become a very good defender. A defender that I would trust as probably my best defender on the floor, which is what he's going to be when you put in that starting line, when you put him into that starting lineup instead of who was I don't know if it was Jeff Green. I'm not really sure who was in that starting lineup for KD, but it's gonna be ridiculous to even watch. And I've been saying it for a while. I want my Miami Heat to play them already so I can see how we stack up. And I don't think we're nowhere near as good offensively to keep up with this team. And adding those front court options to this team, that's going to do wonders for them. The fact that now Steve Nash has so many different ways that he can go with this team. He wants to play, that methodical, half-court game. You put in LaMarcus Aldridge, and he can, run a lot of pick and pops, pick and rolls, decent, okay defensively. You want a guy who can stretch the floor, make the extra pass. You put Blake Griffin. You want a big man down low that'll just be a beast inside. You can put DeAndre Jordan, and then you want the athletic young guy. You got Nicholas Claxton, and even Jeff Green if you want to go small ball. That's the beauty of this team. It's the fact that they have so many different options that they can go to at that front court position, which was an issue once they let go of Jared Allen. It was like, what are they going to do? Now adding these veteran pieces that are motivated to win a title, it really changes the game, and it really makes things difficult for everybody else in the East. So now let's move on to Vucevic and the Bulls, who, since him joining, they've lost 3 straight. Of course, I'm not blaming any of that on Vucevic because, it's a brand new team, brand new system. He needs to get, used to everything around him. And he's not doing bad. He's averaging 22 points a game, 9 rebounds, 4 assists, just under a steal and a block a game. So, he's still playing pretty well. His 3-point shot's a little, shaky, 33% on 4 attempts in those 3 games. But again, it's only 3 games. But when I really think about what he will bring to this team, of course you got to think about that combination of Zach LaVine and Vucevic. It's just to be able to do those pick and rolls, that pick and pop. Is that who are you going to guard? Are you going to double team Zach LaVine because he's one of the best scorers in the entire NBA? Or are you gonna let him drive to the paint and do one of his nasty dunks to try to stop Vucevic at the 3-point line? It's a pick your poison type of play, and once they get that rhythm, it's going to be a very dangerous combination, especially since they both score very efficiently. But the players that I want to see him really help grow are guys like Lauri Markkanen, Kobe White, Patrick Williams. And I feel like I would love to see Vucevic, even though I'm sure they've already played minutes together, but Vucevic and Thaddeus Young playing together, I feel like that would easily be the lineup at the end of games. You have Vucevic at center, you'd have Thaddeus Young at power forward, and after that you play how you want to play it. Maybe Patrick, because Patrick Williams has had a very good underrated rookie season, and then you have maybe Zach LaVine and Kobe White as your backcourt. But man, I think that is so dangerous there because those are 2, I'm talking about Young and Vucevic. Those are 2 very good passing bigs that are very unselfish. Vucevic great in the post so he can play inside out. And it can be a good combination. But obviously, early on, the results have just not been there. They've lost. Who are the teams they've lost to? They lost to the Phoenix Suns, 116-121. So, that's not a terrible loss. They did lose to Golden State, 102-116. So, they are giving up a lot of points. And then they even lost to San Antonio Spurs. They gave up 120 points. So, the defense so far has not been there. But, it really hasn't been there all season. They've been a lower half team, allowing 112 points a game. It'll be whether their offense can take an extra jolt with now you adding Nikola Vucevic, one of the best offensive centers in the league, alongside Zach LaVine. And they got to take advantage of this window because now you got Vucevic at 30 years old. Right, he's 30 if I'm not mistaken. I don't actually have his age here. Let me look it up. Hold on real quick. I'm pretty sure he's 30 years old. Yeah, you got Vucevic at 30. You got Zach LaVine at like 28. You need to take advantage of this window. These are your guys. Oh, LaVine's actually 26. Just turned 26. So you got 2 guys, 2 all-stars that you're investing in now because you just gave up away 2 first-round picks. Wendell Carter Jr., you gave up a lot to bring in And in my opinion, not enough, but still, you brought in a decent package to bring in Vucevic to pair him up with Zach LaVine. You need to take advantage of this. Keep adding guys around. I love Thad Young. I think that's a great piece to have here, and I think it'll do wonders for the Bulls in the long run. I don't think this season's going to be anything realistic. Like, maybe they can make a play-in spot. Where are they right now in the standings? Like, they're somewhere around 10. Yeah, they're 10th right now. Like, a game and a half or 2 games ahead of Toronto, but they're still like 2 games behind Indiana for the 9th spot. So technically they're right on that edge of the play-in spot, which is obviously not what they want to be after making this trip. They're making it so that they can do a push for a 7-6 seed, which they're still technically there. You know, I mean, from 4 to 13, it's like 6 games difference. That really isn't anything when you consider the disparity of the standings there. So Chicago certainly have a chance to make a run. They just have to do it quickly because, we're at like 24 games left in the season, and they need to get it going as soon as possible. But I still do love this pairing of Vucevic with Zach LaVine. I just don't see it defensively, and obviously the results early are kind of mirroring that. So they probably need to stick him more with like a Thaddeus Young. I would not be surprised if you see a Thaddeus Young starting more, because before with Wendell Carter, who wasn't really that great a shooter, putting in Lauri Markkanen as your starting power forward was the obvious thing to do because he's a very solid shooter. But I don't know if they are willing to bench one of their best young players, in Lauri Markkanen for Thaddeus Young, who's obviously, much more up there in age. He's like 32 or 33, I believe. But I think that combination would be so much better than Lauri Markkanen and Nikola Vucevic. But we'll just have to wait and see how the rest of that season pans out. Now, lastly in this segment, we're going to talk about PJ Tucker. There really isn't much to say here because we knew him joining in here was just as in my opinion, it'll show up more in the playoffs because PJ Tucker style of play is something that'll benefit way more once things slow down in the playoffs, and it's all more methodical play. I think that's where PJ Tucker will shine the most because obviously in his first, how many games has he played? His first 3 games off the bench, he's averaged 15 minutes. He's got 1 point a game, 2 rebounds, just under a block a game. So he still gives you a little bit defensively, but for the most part, it's been, pretty much nothing from PJ Tucker over the first couple games of his Bucks career. So I'm not expecting much from him now. I don't expect him to go into the starting lineup, obviously, because this is just a depth piece that they can now plug in there. Maybe when Brook Lopez isn't really giving you much on the offensive end, and he's not really the same defensively this year. So I can certainly see a spot where they put Giannis at 5, you put PJ Tucker at the 4, and then you got Chris Middleton, Dante DiVincenzo, and Drew Holiday. And I think that would be a very good starting 5. I think that would be very dangerous. You bring Brook Lopez off the bench, and you can use Bobby Portis a little more, like at the 4. And I think that's a pretty solid backcourt, front court off the bench. Bobby Portis and Brook Lopez. Obviously, for right now, they're still going with Brook Lopez, which is fine. It's the obvious choice to make. But I don't think it's going to last going into the playoffs, especially when you consider that Brook Lopez's 3-point shot really hasn't been there again this season. He's averaging, 33% from the 3-point line on 6 attempts. PJ Tucker can give you more than that. Of course, he hasn't done it so far. He's averaging 3 attempts a game, only hitting 25% of them. But when he's in the lineup with those 5 that I mentioned, Giannis, DiVincenzo, Drew Holiday, and Chris Middleton, I think it'll open up things a lot more for him. Because if you're putting Giannis in the middle of the paint, people are going to collapse on him. It's just happening. And you put PJ Tucker in that corner, his favorite spot, the best shot in the NBA, it will be dangerous. So for now, obviously, things aren't going that great with PJ Tucker. But like I said, once it's playoff time, I think it'll show itself much more, and he'll be way more effective in that style of play. So that's going to wrap it up for this segment. Make sure you guys stick around because when I come back, I'm going to be talking about Victor Oladipo, Aaron Gordon, what they're doing for their teams, and of course, that Norman Powell, Gary Trent Jr. swap. I'm going to be analyzing that right after this.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. If you missed the last segment, we talked about the fits for LaMarcus Aldridge and Blake Griffin on the Brooklyn Nets. We also talked about Nikola Vucevic and the Bulls, and as well as gave a quick little thought on PJ Tucker and the Bucks. And now we're going to be talking about Victor Oladipo and Aaron Gordon joining their new teams for the playoff pushes, and what Norman Powell and Gary Trent Jr., what that swap has done for both of those teams. I first want to start with Aaron Gordon because I absolutely love the fit alongside Nikola Jokic in that front court. I mean, I think it's like a picture-perfect fit because now the Denver Nuggets have a forward that can defend at a high level, can hit the three on occasion, and can also pass the ball pretty well. He does a lot of different things. He also adds a lot of athleticism to that front court. And I just think it's going to do so many things for the Denver Nuggets. He's already had a pretty good game with them. Let's see, right now, where is he at? Where's Aaron Gordon? There he is. He's played 3 games. He started them all because now he is the official, starting power forward for that team. And they got that starting lineup of, Michael Porter Jr., Jamal Murray, Will Barton, Nikola Jokic, and now Aaron Gordon, which now allows you to have Paul Millsap off the bench as well, which I think is going to do great for Paul Millsap. He won't have to go up against starter-level players. Now, it's kind of like a Goran Dragic situation. Paul Millsap's obviously getting up there in age. He's 35 now, which I believe is the exact same age as Goran Dragic, and when Dragic first moved to the bench, this is going to be a quick example. I'm not going to talk about the Heat too much, but as when Dragic made that switch to the bench, a lot of people were like, why are you putting him there? Dragic has been great for us on, starting. He's one of our best guards, if not our best guard, which, yeah, he pretty much is. But as soon as he went there, you could tell the way he was, just organizing the team, making the right plays, and kind of organizing that second unit. It goes a long way into really helping your team overall. And I feel like that's going to happen. The same thing is going to happen here with Paul Millsap playing off the bench now. It's going to do a lot of things. It's going to open things up for him. It's going to allow him to kind of, take charge of that second unit because now it's going to be him with Monty Morris. You're going to have, Gary Harris isn't there anymore, but you're going to have, JaMychal Green, I think, is still there. PJ Dozier, Facundo Campazzo. You're going to have a lot of guys there that'll be, now kind of fixed around him in that second unit because they really didn't have, in my opinion, a very solid player off that bench. Gary Harris was a decent player, but, the idea of him is like a lot bigger than the actual reality that is Gary Harris. He's not really having that crazy of a season. Paul Millsap is not having a crazy season either, averaging 10 points a game, 5 rebounds, just under a steal and a block a game. But now you add Aaron Gordon into this team. He's averaging 11 points for them, 4 rebounds, 3 assists, almost 2 steals a game. He adds such a different dynamic to that starting lineup that is usually surrounded by mostly shooting, which will allow him to get into the paint a lot, make cuts, make timely cuts. And I think that's going to be the biggest thing with Aaron Gordon. He wasn't really asked to do much of that, like playing off the ball. I mean, yes, Vucevic had the ball a lot in Orlando, but he was still kind of trying to be considered the star, or obviously they got away from that like the past year or so, because we know what Aaron Gordon is. He's no longer that. he no longer has that type of potential. But to be, a perfect running mate with a guy like Nikola Jokic, who, the passing abilities that he has, you got to always have your hands ready, be ready for one of those crazy passes that, you just never know when it's going to come, because he will find you. And I think that this guy is going to do wonders for this team. And it's not only, on that offensive end. Like I said in the beginning, his defense, I feel like that will be the biggest thing, because obviously, Jokic is a very, very good offensive player. The 26 points per game, the 11 rebounds, 8 assists. He is averaging 1.5 steals a game, which at the moment, I guess if you don't really consider Aaron Gordon's 1.7 steals a game, is the highest on the team. So he is pretty underrated defensively, Jokic is. But Aaron Gordon now gives you a legitimate defender on that front court, one that you can put, that you can switch at any point. He can guard some perimeter players. He's big enough that he can guard inside as well. You're still going to have Jokic playing the centers, but in terms of like those bigger power forwards and the ones that are quicker, they'll no longer have an advantage on the Denver Nuggets when, they're normally getting covered by a guy like Paul Millsap, who just doesn't have that athleticism anymore. You now have Aaron Gordon, who, is just way more athletic and can do a lot more things on that end. Now, in terms of the offensive fit, I think it's going to be perfect as well. Like I told you, it's a picture perfect fit. It does not get better than this. Like that's why the Denver Nuggets are considered probably the winners of the trade market, or the trade deadline, as they say. It all depends on how he really works on that offensive end. If he ends up becoming like a 13 to 15 point score, which is really all they need from him. They don't need much more than that, because they have so many more offensive weapons like Jokic, Murray, Michael Porter Jr. Those guys get a big chunk of the points, and obviously Will Barton as well does his thing. But if this guy Aaron Gordon can average about 12 to 15 points, can get you a couple threes, a couple cuts to the basket, get a thunderous dunk, because that's certainly one of the things he does, and really is probably the only player on this team now that can really do that. Because before this, was there really anybody who was a high flyer on this team? Well, Michael Porter Jr. maybe, but I don't even think so. It's Aaron Gordon now. Former slam dunk champion, did he win the slam dunk champion? I actually don't think he did. Now that I think about it, I think that's like the thing, that he's never been able to win the slam dunk champion, despite being an amazing dunker and having some great slam dunk contests. But regardless, and he's also super young. He's 25 years old, so he fits with this timeline of Jokic and Murray. It just gives them another piece that they add to this young core that's going to grow together. Because you got Jokic at 20. Jokic is 25 years old. That blows my mind. And then you got Murray at 23, Michael Porter Jr. at 22, Monty Morris at 25, and now you add Aaron Gordon at 25 as well. It's such a perfect add. And I think it's going to just do so many things for them. I'm really, really excited for what Aaron Gordon's going to do. And I think it's going to work even more in the playoffs. That's going to be your final five. Your starting five is more often than not going to be your final five, because Will Barton gives you a lot defensively. Obviously, you need Murray. You're going to have Murray and Jokic in there, and Porter as your other, offensive guy that can kind of be a third option and kind of get a point on his own. But Aaron Gordon could do that as well. He's shown flashes of it. So to have another guy that can also, hold on to the ball, play make. I think his last game he had like 14 points, 6 assists, 6 rebounds. If he gives you that every game, the Nuggets are going to be a title contender this year. They're going to be up there. And I put them as one of the teams that are going to be the hottest going into the second half of the season. They've proven that so far, as they've been absolutely killing it. They've won their last 3 games with Aaron Gordon. They beat the Hawks 126-102, killed them. They beat the Philadelphia 76ers. That's a huge win, 104-95. And they beat the Clippers 101-94. So you can already see there the defense has been locking it down. While this whole season, they've been like bottom half of the league in terms of defense. Offense, it's been as good as it has. And I think their offense and defense will actually go up in both ways with Aaron Gordon added to this team. Mainly because, of course, everything I've said about Aaron Gordon, but then I can't reiterate this enough. what it means for Paul Millsap moving to that second unit. It's going to do so many things for all the other players that are going to be playing with him, and I can't wait to see this team in the playoffs. They're going to be a very hard out. I don't think they're going to make a push for a fourth seed. I mean, maybe. Let me see where they're at. They're currently fifth. They're tied with the Lakers, so I guess it all depends on what happens with the Lakers, like if they get LeBron or AD back soon. But yeah, I guess technically you can see them squeeze into a top 4 spot, especially the Clippers are only a game ahead of them with 2 games played, 2 more games played. Phoenix, on the other hand, that's, they've been playing so well. They got 4 less losses than all 3 of the Clippers, Lakers, and Nuggets, and even Portland, who are also right behind. It's very tight up top. Like, you look at that, like 3 to 6 in the West are separated by a game and a half. That's nothing. A game and a half. And that's Portland that still needs to play 3 more games because the Clippers have 3 extra games. But regardless, I'm going off topic from the Denver Nuggets. I feel like they could certainly, with this addition, make a push for a home court spot in the Western Conference. It's going to be very interesting to see how that works out. And now let's talk about Victor Oladipo joining the Miami Heat. Had an uneven debut, couldn't play the first game or last game or the game before that because he had a head cold. So it didn't really, it was a delayed debut. But he did come in and he played great defense. That has to be the first thing that is said about what Victor Oladipo brings to this team. It's the defense. He is going to play a lot of defense. Eventually he's going to get his scoring together and actually be a decent piece. I think he can be a third or fourth option because sometimes, you'll have a Goran Dragic as your third option, a Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson as like that guy who's going to score a lot of points also from the dribble handoffs with Bam Adebayo. And that's obviously the beauty about this team, the fact that they have so many different players that they can go to score buckets. But I think Victor Oladipo is eventually, once he gets used to the system, he took only 8 attempts last game. He only made 2 of them, so he didn't really have an efficient game. He only scored 6 points. He had 5 assists, though, so the playmaking is obviously going to be a huge thing that he adds to this team, as well as really the only playmakers, true playmakers that they have on this team are Bam and Jimmy and Goran Dragic. Those are the only guys. Kendrick Nunn can score buckets, but he doesn't really, pass the ball around a lot. Tyler Hero is more of a bucket getter as well. And yeah, that's about it. Like, nobody else can really dish the ball out and create for himself and open things up for the other players. Victor Oladipo adds that to this team, and when you consider the fact that he does that, I'm sure the offense will will start going, and I don't think he's going to average over 20 points per game with the Heat like he has for the Rockets, the Indiana Pacers. I think it'll be between 15 to 20 points per game. I think you can see him in that 18 points per game range. I certainly feel like that is a possibility for him. And also, you'll see those 5 assists a game. I can absolutely see it because there are going to be times when the Heat need him to have the ball in his hands, especially late in the game, because he's got more of a threat from 3 other than Jimmy Butler. And Jimmy Butler is great at playing off the ball. His cutting is almost as dangerous as any weapon in the league. And then obviously you have those Victor Oladipo, Bam Adebayo pick and rolls, which already showed positive things in the first game they had against the Golden State Warriors. Like that lob that Victor Oladipo tossed up to Bam Adebayo, there's going to be so much of that, I can't say it enough. But the one thing that Victor Oladipo is going to bring to this team is a lockdown perimeter defender. He already showed it against the Warriors, how there was this one play where he absolutely shut down. Well, I mean, it was for a lot of the game. Like, he was playing great defense for most of this game. But there was one play in particular that just rings in my mind where Stephen Curry was faked taking a pick and roll, tried going right, and Victor Oladipo was right there with him. Even after he faked the shot, Victor Oladipo didn't go up, had quick enough feet to stay with Steph Curry, made Curry stumble a little bit, and he poked the ball out of bounds. Beautiful defense from Victor Oladipo, and that's something that the Heat do not have on this team. Jimmy Butler is a great perimeter defender. Same thing with Bam Adebayo, but they're not going to match up a Jimmy Butler with a Kyrie Irving. I'm just going to put it, them against Brooklyn, how they match against Brooklyn. They're not going to put a Jimmy Butler against a Kyrie Irving. They would put Goran Dragic, Tyler Hero, Kendrick Nunn on a Goran Dragic. I mean, on a Kyrie Irving. They're going to get sauced. They would have gotten sauced. You put Victor Oladipo now on Kyrie Irving, that changes things. Because you need to have Jimmy Butler on James Harden, and then obviously a combination of Trevor Ariza, Andre Iguodala, and Bam on Kevin Durant. That's just the way it has to go. You can't afford to use your two best defensive players on Kyrie Irving. That just doesn't work. But now with a what is the thing that they say on 5 Reasons Sports? I forgot what it's called, but it's just the when the point guard's the one that handles the ball and can just drive by. I forgot, they say it all the time on 5 Reasons Sports, but it's Victor Oladipo is the guy that can stop those point guards, that can lock them down. And I feel like that's going to be the biggest addition that he brings to this team. His hustle, his defense, and his ability to play make. It's going to work in so many different ways, and I can't wait till he starts getting into a rhythm. Of course, his first game, he's wanted to be here for so long, there's going to be jitters. It's not uncommon. But once he starts getting into his rhythm, once he starts knowing the plays, gets familiar with the system, he's going to be the third best player on this team. There is no doubt on my mind that he's going to be the third best player on this team. And his addition, along with obviously Ariza and Bielitsa, also, because it's good to have a stretch big on the team. When you lost Kelly Olynyk, who, I was always hard on Kelly Olynyk, but in the long run, I would have loved to keep him if it was possible. Obviously, it wasn't in the end, but Nemanja Bielitsa is going to be also a very good addition. But obviously, it all is all about Victor Oladipo and just the dynamic stuff that he brings on the defensive end. It's going to be very exciting. And there were times, even when it wasn't the perimeter guys, where he was just hustling hard on the rebounds. Like he had such a height disparity against, I forgot who it was. I think it was like a James Wiseman or a Kevin Looney, where they had clear position for the rebound. But Victor Oladipo just fought and would poke the ball free and would get it out of their hands. And it's just that kind of stuff that is going to be the most apparent thing that he brings to the team early on. It will. And I can't wait to see him get more comfortable and become an even bigger part of what this team brings on that end. It's going to be very exciting, and I really, really can't wait. But yeah, that's pretty much all I got to say about Victor Oladipo, because it's only been one game. We still got to see how he gets comfortable with the team. He obviously wants to be here, and I feel like that is one of the biggest things about it. The fact that in Indiana towards the end of his career there, you could tell that he didn't want to be at Indiana anymore. It just wasn't going to work out. And then obviously Houston, they're rebuilding. That's not where he wants to be at this point of his career. He wants to be contending for championships. He wants to be in a culture that prioritizes winning, and that's what the Heat bring. And the rumors have been there for so long that he wants to play for the Miami Heat. I mean, I believe he even has a house here. He comes here during the off season to work out. So it all works in so many different ways, and I really, really can't wait to see it work out. So now let's talk about the Portland Trailblazers Toronto Raptors switch of Norman Powell and Gary Trent Jr. We're going to look at both these players, see how they've done so far with their new teams, and see which one will work out more in the long run. Now, first, before I even talk, we need to mention that Gary Trent Jr. and Norman Powell are very different in age. Gary Trent Jr. is 22 years old, just starting off his career. I mean, I think he's third year in the league, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, he's actually, third year in the league, yes. This is his third year in the league, while Norman Powell has been in the league for some time now, and, he's 27 years old. I think it's his 6th or 7th year in the league. I remember, he's been in this league for some time. Let me go and just check that out real quick before I see anything else. Let's see, Norman Powell, he has been in the league for 6 years. So, you got two players that, one that's kind of entering his prime a little bit, the other that's, just starting off. And in the long run, I love the Norman Powell move. It was very, it was a head scratcher at first because you're wondering where are you going to put him. He's a sharpshooter, a guy who also plays really good defense. But he's a guy that you would usually have at your shooting guard position. You know, what's his height right now? What is he? Well, not right now, but what is his height? He's a 6'3" guard. That's just what he's known at. He's played some small forward because obviously, you know, Toronto runs 2-guard lineups of Lowry and Fred VanVleet. So there was a possibility there that he could play as your small forward. And that's what they've done so far. In his 3 games there, he has played the small forward each time because now C.J. McCollum's back. And he's done really well. He's averaging 16 points a game for them on 51, almost 52% shooting, 58% from 3 on 4 attempts a game. Obviously, that's not going to sustain itself. And the best thing for him here is that he doesn't really have to hold on to the ball. He doesn't need to be, of course, when Damian Lillard and C.J. McCollum come off the floor, they'll be asking him to kind of take on more of a ball handling role. But for the most part, he won't be asked to do that. He'll be more of a spot-up shooter, a guy who's going to be asked to cut, play off those 2, ball-handling guards. And I think that's where Norman Powell fits best, especially so that he can put more of his effort on the defensive end. That's going to be the biggest thing because in his first 3 games, he's averaging 2 steals a game and a block a game. He is probably their best defender, I would say, like close to that because they do have Robert Covington. He's having a very good defensive season. He's averaging almost 2 steals a game, over a block a game. He's having a very solid defensive season. He's also much bigger. He can guard multiple positions. Norman Powell is going to be the guy that they would try to hide, so that they can hide a guy like C.J. McCollum or Damian Lillard. He'll be the one guarding like the best guards on the other team. And that's a very good option to have for that. And so I think that it's going to fit pretty well. The only thing is that they will be very undersized because they don't have Joseph Nurkic right now. He's injured. So they're going with Enes Kanter, who's also an undersized big at them. I think he's like 6'9". He's 6'10", so not bad, but he can bang down low with the bigs. And then obviously you got Carmelo Anthony coming off the bench. Derrick Jones Jr. has been a starter. Robert Covington has been also a big starter. He's probably going to be the guy that plays at that power forward position. So you look at those first 4 positions. You got Robert Covington at 6'7". You got Norman Powell at 6'3". C.J. McCollum is 6'3" as well. And Damian Lillard is 6'2". So you have 3 players on that team that are 6'3" or lower. Like, you would need to rely so heavy on Enes Kanter. So there are obviously some pros and cons to having Norman Powell added to that starting lineup. The defense, in my opinion, kind of, because you have 2+ defenders on that team, the rest are negative defenders. Because while Enes Kanter certainly is one of the better offensive rebounders in the league and one of the best rebounders overall in the league, he's not a great post defender. He's not a good, you can't switch him out on guards. He'll get beat. It'll be bad. But you add Joseph Nurkic to that team, you have Enes Kanter off the bench. It can work in a couple different ways, but there's still a lot of ways that you can exploit that lineup. But I still love the addition of Norman Powell. He adds another one. He adds kind of like that third scoring option that Gary Trent was. Like, so you don't really lose anything in that sense. Carmelo is still that guy that comes off the bench and kind of gives that second unit a jolt. You got Derrick Jones Jr., the high flyer that plays solid defense. Of course, Lillard and McCollum's role do not change. It really is Norman Powell replacing Gary Trent Jr. So you're getting more of a proven player for this playoff run. So I understand what they're doing here because, you got Lillard at 30, McCollum at 29, Covington at 30. You needed someone that is more proven and can do a lot of the same things, though Powell is a much better defender. He does a lot more things on the defensive end that Gary Trent Jr. does. So in the long run, I understand what they were thinking here. It couldn't work. And Portland's having a very solid season. They're 6th in the Western Conference, 29-18. They're only a game and a half behind the Clippers for the 4th seed. So they're looking at this move as a chance to make a push for one of those top 4 spots. And it can certainly work. They do need to get Joseph Nurkic back. That is huge. He's only played like 16 games this season. Like, they need to find a way to get him back as soon as possible and start getting this lineup working with only about a little more than 20 games left in the season. So, in the long run, I do like this move. Now, when you go to the other side and the Toronto Raptors side, I also understand why they made this move because the Toronto Raptors are kind of in the other side of it. they're now kind of entering, kind of like a mini rebuild because they do have some solid players. They got Fred VanVleet, Pascal Siakam, Kyle Lowry. He's obviously getting way up there in age at 34. Not really sure where that is going to head, whether he leaves in free agency, because the Raptors, obviously this season has been a very down year. They're 18-30 right now, 11th in the Eastern Conference. Still have a chance for that play-in spot, but entering this season, nobody was expecting Toronto to be, kind of vying for a play-in spot. They were kind of considered one of those teams that were going to get a top 6 seed. That guaranteed. But obviously the season has not panned out that way. They're not even playing in Toronto. That's obviously a huge loss for them, and that cannot be understated. The fact that they can't play in their home arena, who has a huge home court advantage. I mean, those Canada fans are insane. So there's a lot of reasons to understand why the Toronto Raptors are not having that good a year. But you add a Gary Trent Jr. who kind of goes along with this, this young rebuild, semi-rebuild that they're having. Even though Norman Powell was 27, but you still got a younger player who can still fill that scoring guard role that you want off the bench, which, at the moment, Gary Trent's actually starting. I'm not really sure. So I guess they're doing the same thing where Gary Trent starts at small forward, which is just weird to me, man. Well, he's 6'5". He's a little bit bigger. So I guess, but so it's kind of the same thing. It was literally a swap where they have Norman Powell playing the Gary Trent role and they have Gary Trent playing the Norman Powell role. The only thing is that Gary Trent just isn't as proven, and he is playing pretty well. In his 4 starts, he's got 15 points per game, 3 rebounds, about 1.3 steals a game, and but his shooting hasn't been there. Is 41% from the field. 36% from 3, not terrible on 7 attempts a game. So he certainly is, kind of been that sharpshooter that they're hoping for him to be. And he does a lot of things. He can be a 3-and-D guy, a guy who can handle the ball a little bit, although he won't be asked to because, you got Kyle Lowry, VanVleet on that team. Although Kyle Lowry is going to be out for a little bit now. I think he's got like a foot infection or something like that. And he's going to be out for a little bit, about a week or so. But I do like this move because it does, you add a younger piece to that, youth movement that they have. You add them to an OG Anunoby that's 23, and Pascal Siakam and Fred VanVleet are 26. Though it's just the way Norman Powell was playing. Maybe I know this was also a financial move. I'm not really very knowledgeable on the whole cap space situation for these two teams. But I think it was like they both have the bird rights on them now, so they can go over the cap to sign them. And maybe it was Norman Powell was going to ask for a lot more heading into this season, into this offseason. So they were looking for a cheaper option, and someone that's a lot younger that can do a lot of the same things that Norman Powell was doing for them. But the way he was playing, man, before that they traded him, he had like a 40-point game, 36-point game. He was lighting it up. I feel like they could have gotten a little bit more than just Gary Trent Jr., though he's still a pretty good piece. Once he starts getting used to the system, shoots, gets a little more efficient with his looks, he's got a lot of players that can help him out with that. Guys who have been there and done that, like a Lowry, a Siakam, a VanVleet, guys who have won championships already, a championship, they can help him out with that. So I like the move both ways. More on the Portland side because I see them as a win-now move, a guy that can help them on both sides of the ball. And obviously, like I said, there are ways to exploit that Portland Trailblazers lineup with Norman Powell at the small forward position, but he's a good enough defender to kind of exploit any of those cons. So in the end, I like that Trailblazers move, even though a lot of people were were scratching their heads at it. But it was still really good. So that's going to wrap it up for this segment. Make sure you guys stick around because when I come back, I'm going to be talking about whether the Jazz are serious contenders in the Western Conference or in the league. Are they contenders for that title? We'll talk about that right after this.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. If you missed the last segment, we went over the Victor Oladipo and Aaron Gordon fits on their brand new teams as they get ready for that playoff push. And I also went over the Norman Powell, Gary Trent Jr. swap. So if you guys want to go check that out, please go and do so. But now we're going to be talking about, are the Jazz, and I decided to add this in as I was getting ready to put this in, but are the Jazz and the Suns serious title contenders? Because those are the two biggest surprise teams this season, as they're now first and second in the Western Conference, respectfully, which is obviously the most competitive conference of the two, and they've been dominating this entire season. It's not that they've just been scraping by wins. This team is also first and second in margin of victory, so they have been running through the league. So I want to go over both and see, are they serious title contenders? Because when you think of the Western Conference and who you expect to make it into the finals, the first team on that list is always going to be the Los Angeles Lakers, the defending champions, because even though they're in the third or their fourth seed right now, they're obviously dealing with injuries to AD and now LeBron James. So you don't really know. Well, we do know how that team is, and especially when they added all these brand new players like Montrezl Harrell and Dennis Schroeder, they got better than they were last year. So that's the team that you look at as who everyone needs to go through. So I think, can the Utah Jazz or the Suns really pose a serious threat to the Lakers? But then you also think of teams like the Clippers, even though the Clippers don't have that same feel that they did last year, because now they have to prove that they can actually win in the playoffs. After what happened last year to the Denver Nuggets, there's questions now. So obviously it's not the same feel, but that's another team that people consider title contenders. And then another team I add in there would be the Denver Nuggets, a team that obviously just adding Aaron Gordon, which we just talked about in the first segment, in the second segment. That's a big addition. And then you got an MVP candidate in Nikola Jokic. You got Jamal Murray. You got a team that made it to the conference finals last year and looks even better this season. So do these teams stack up? I want to first start off with the Suns. They're the second seed, and then I'll work on to the Jazz. Now, for the Suns, they're having, like I've already said, an incredible season. At the moment, they're 33-14, good for second in the Western Conference. And they've been good on both sides of the floor. They're a top 10 offense. They're 8th in offensive rating with 115, almost 116 points per game. And they're 5th in defensive rating. I think that's the most important thing here. The fact that they're a top 5 defense as well, keeping teams to 109 points a game. That's good for a plus 6.5 net rating. Second in the whole league. That's incredible. And on top of that, I'm looking at this right now. Their preseason odds for a championship this year was plus 4,000 on the money. That's insane odds for them to be. Any Phoenix Suns fans that bet money on them before the season starts is feeling pretty good right now. Because those, for 4,000, you put $100, you win 4,000. That's insane. But regardless, this team has shown a lot of things this season. And a lot of that has to do with in my opinion, of course, you got to look at Chris Paul, a man who has gone wherever he's gone. He has brought winning basketball with him. He's a floor general. He's one of the best point guards of all time, and he organizes everything on the floor. The Heat recently played them, and just looking at the way he manipulates the defense and makes everything work in his favor. The man's playing chess. Everyone else is playing checkers. So he is obviously the key piece there. You obviously look at Devin Booker as well, but he's been, even though he's having a career year, he's been there for some time and has been balling for a while. He's been an up-and-coming young player. The ones I look at really that have, aside from Chris Paul, is Mikal Bridges and Jay Crowder. Those are the two players there that really transform this team into, a dangerous playoff team. Because the one thing you need when you get to the playoffs are guys that can shoot threes, play within an offense, and play defense, first and foremost. And Jay Crowder and Mikal Bridges are great defenders, versatile defenders on top of that. So you add that onto your team, and you got in my opinion, one of the most versatile starting fives in the entire league, with Chris Paul, Devin Booker, Mikal Bridges, Jay Crowder, and DeAndre Ayton. That is a dangerous starting five. Of course, when you start looking at the bench, that's where things get a little bit tougher. I like Dario Saric. He's been playing pretty well this season off the bench. He's averaging, 10 points, 4 rebounds. The defense is obviously not there, but he's giving you a little bit on that offensive side. Cameron Johnson has also been a big plus since adding him as a rookie last season. Cameron Payne, I'm not big on him. Torrey Craig is a decent add, gives you some decent defense, but it gets a little rough from that point on. However, you also got to think about it this way: in the playoffs, rotations get shortened in a big way. You only got maybe 3, maybe 4 players that get played regularly. And with that starting five there, which is, like I said, one of the best and most versatile in the entire league, you can do a lot of different things. But of course, you need some depth. And they kind of have little to no guard depth behind Booker and Chris Paul. And that's where I feel like this team has the biggest issues. You're relying heavily on Cameron Payne. What is he average? Yeah, he's your primary guard off the bench. You got Frank Kaminsky. They go with guys with Etuan Moore, Langston Galloway, Abdel Nader. And sure, in the regular season, you can deal with, not having a crazy bench as long as your starters are really killing it, which they are. You got Devin Booker at 25 points a game, 4.5 assists, 4 rebounds, giving you decent defense and shooting, pretty efficiently as well. And then you got Mikal Bridges, 13 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, very solid defense. Chris Paul, very solid defense. And like I said, the organizer, the creator of everything that goes on in that offense with 16 points a game, almost 9 assists, 1.5 steals. Obviously, DeAndre Ayton's having kind of a down year this year, but most centers would kill for these numbers. 14.5 points, 11 rebounds, almost 2 blocks. No, 1.1 blocks, 1.5 assists. And then Jay Crowder, he's that glue guy. 10 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, and pretty solid defense. And the fact that you have 2 guys that you consider glue guys, but are also pretty decent three-point shooters. Mikal Bridges shooting over 40% from the three-point line. Jay Crowder 38% this season. That's still pretty solid. That's above average. I'm pretty sure the average in the league is about 36%. So 38.5% from the three-point line is pretty solid for Jay Crowder. And you get that in your starting lineup. You can match up with any starting lineup in the entire Western Conference. I don't care who you have. Because even if you go up against a LeBron James and the Lakers, you can throw Mikal Bridges and Jay Crowder on them. Obviously you'd want to hide Chris Paul and Devin Booker. Not Chris Paul, but at least Devin Booker as much as possible so, he saves most of his energy on the offensive end. And DeAndre Ayton, a combination of whichever one of Mikal Bridges and Jay Crowder, and then, of course, DeAndre Ayton would have to take care of Anthony Davis. But in my opinion, I feel like they don't have a legitimate stopper for Anthony Davis because we saw in the finals last year when Jay Crowder was put on him, he wasn't terrible, but he didn't really slow him down. Anthony Davis got his. The only times that it was really a decent matchup was towards the end of the series when Bam Adebayo came back and he was guarding him and he had some good minutes against him. But again, Bam Adebayo is one of the best defensive centers in the entire NBA, and they don't have that kind of guy on this roster. They just don't. And I know Mikal Bridges is pretty long, but he's not big enough or strong enough to stop AD in the post. DeAndre Ayton's, I don't know. I don't feel good with DeAndre Ayton out in the perimeter, which is a lot of what Anthony Davis does now. Obviously he can bang in the post, but at the same time he's a perimeter big that can, kind of create his own shot off the dribble. And I just don't feel like the Suns have any answer for that. For LeBron James, I feel like they do have some answers there, but I just don't see them consistently stopping Anthony Davis enough to really make this a series. Of course, you would need the Lakers would need Anthony Davis to play really well, and then you got Montrezl Harrell to worry about. You got a lot of pieces on that Lakers team that'll make it very hard. And then, other teams, I feel like I said, the Suns can certainly match up, especially with those 2, 3-and-D guys in Crowder and Bridges. That certainly levels them up on the defensive end. That's one of the main reasons why they're a top 5 defense this season. Aside from obviously Chris Paul playing, really good defense on the perimeter. But overall, I feel like this Phoenix Suns team certainly has a lot of potential to be a dangerous team in the playoffs. And you got to credit Monty Williams and, of course, James Jones in the front office for putting this team together and making them as good as they are this season. Like, this is as good as the Phoenix Suns have been since the Steve Nash days. It's been that long. And I'm really excited about it because, of course, whenever any team has been bad for so long, like, it's good to see them finally get out of that, rut and actually play some good basketball for more than just, a couple games in a row. And then you look at I'm going to look at their schedule real quick before we move on. They haven't really hit any, the start of the season, they had a couple bad losses, like where they lost to the Wizards, Grizzlies back-to-back, and they lost to the Pistons in there as well. So those were some tough losses. They lost back-to-back overtime games to the Denver Nuggets, and those were some close games. And then they lost to the Oklahoma City Thunder as well. And at that point, they were 8-8 on the season. After that, they just kept winning and winning. They went on a streak where they won, 9 of 10 games they won. And then they lost 2 in 5 games, but then now they're on another streak where they're winning 6 in their last 7 or 7 in their last 8. They're just rattling off these victories, and it's not against terrible teams. They beat the Lakers, even though yes, the Lakers are without LeBron and AD for this game. Still, you beat the Lakers and you beat them thoroughly. You beat the Miami Heat, you beat the Raptors, the Hornets, the Hawks, the Bulls. All teams that are vying for playoff spots in the Eastern Conference. And I'm not saying those are, really good victories. You got to hang your hat on that. No. But still, you play the teams that you play in front of you and you win the games. And that is what the Phoenix Suns have done. They have really been dominating, and it's very impressive to see. And, of course, you got to give a lot of that credit to Chris Paul, like I've said. But it's how much better they are defensively now. Because there were so many years that the Phoenix Suns, it was like a staple for the Phoenix Suns, that they were a great offensive team, but defensively, they were garbage. Always bottom half of the league. To be top 5 while also being a top 10 offense is very, very impressive, and they'll certainly be a tough out. Now, do I think they'll win the title? I don't think so. This is probably the best team Chris Paul has had, and I would say even better than those Lob City, because that Lob City team was very flawed. Had a lot of flaws on it. But this team, it looks very solid. The bench is the biggest flaw in my opinion, especially when you consider guards. And they don't really have the best centers. I don't know. The bench is certainly the biggest, weakness here for this team. But I don't know. I feel like they can, obviously the first round, I feel like they'll win. Because you look at the Western Conference to see who is in that 8th spot. No, let's see. 7th, you got Dallas. I feel like they can mop Dallas. It's Spurs. If they take on the Spurs, I think that'd be fine. And if for any reason Portland falls down, that would be an interesting series. Portland, you got Damian Lillard versus Chris Paul, CJ McCollum, and Devin Booker. That'd be a very good series. But I'd still pick the Phoenix Suns over them. Now, when you start getting into that next round where they might have to take a team like the Lakers or Denver or the Clippers, that would make it really tough for me to pick Phoenix there. Maybe the Clippers, because I feel like they match up against them well, but I don't think it would go any further than that. And that's, of course, if they hold on to that second seed. There's no reason for me to think they won't, especially with the way they've been playing and the way the Lakers, the Clippers, they just haven't really figured it out 100% this season. Even though they're 32-18 and 30-18 respectfully. Those are really good records. But they're just not as dominant as they were. And of course, for the Lakers, that has to do a lot with the injuries. I understand that. But still, with the Phoenix Suns, I can't see them going any further than probably the conference finals. But I mean, that's still a great season. Obviously, for Chris Paul, he wants more. He wants a title. I just can't see them. Like if they take on Utah, that would be a crazy conference finals. Just imagine that. The Utah Jazz and the Phoenix Suns in the Western Conference Finals, knocking out, let's say, the Lakers and the Clippers in the process. Like, what? Like, what is going on in today's NBA? I mean, that would be insane. But I just don't see it. I think the Lakers are just too good with AD and LeBron there. It's too overwhelming. Like, regardless of you having a really good starting five, like, you need depth. You need more guys off the bench. Like, you can't rely on playing your starters 40-plus minutes a night because that's kind of what it's going to come down to in the playoffs when they need, those guys playing as much as possible. It's going to be tough. It's going to be really hard for them to keep that up and play at a very high level. So I just don't see the Phoenix Suns going any further than the conference finals. And even then, I could see them getting eliminated in the semifinals. So now let's move on to the Utah Jazz, who have easily been the best team all season long. It's not even close. You look at their record, and I know, at the moment, what are they? They're 36-11. First in the NBA, in the entire NBA, and it's not even close. I mean, second in the NBA is, or I guess technically the Phoenix Suns are have the third best record in the entire league, but they have the Utah Jazz have a 3-game gap between them and the Suns. That's huge. And like I was talking about with the Suns, it's not that they're, just getting by teams and just, winning a lot of clutch games, which they are. They're really good in the clutch. This is one of the best clutch teams in the entire league. But they're also dominating their competition. They're first in net rating with a plus 9.4. Remember the Utah Jazz? I said they were like a 6.5, and that's second. The gap there is like what Milwaukee Bucks were doing last season. And you look at the team, their offensive and defensive rating, they're second in the league in offensive rating with 118 points per game, and they're fourth in defensive rating with 108 points allowed a game. That's top 5 in both. That's incredibly dominant, incredibly versatile. And you look at their, the start of the season was a little bit, shaky. Like, they started off 4-4, losses to Brooklyn, the Knicks, the Suns, the Timberwolves. That was a really tough loss. But then they went on an 11-game win streak. They lost a game to Denver, and then they won another 10-game win streak or 9-game win streak. Then that's when they hit a little bit of a of a wall in the season, which it happens to every team. No team is perfect. I mean, no team can go obviously the Warriors went 73-9, but that does not happen every season. That's a record for a reason. So they lost 5 or 6 games in 10 games. So obviously that was their worst stretch of the season. But now they're back to rattling off 7 straight victories, and that's what they're at the moment right now. And those are technically in those 7 games, they took on the Grizzlies 3 times in the past 4 games. That's crazy. They beat the Brooklyn Nets without their big 3, the Bulls, the Raptors, the Cavs. So it's not, big teams, big wins. But regardless, like I said with the Phoenix Suns, you can't do anything about the team that's in front of you. You just have to win. Not every team can do that. The Utah Jazz are doing that. And a lot of that has to do with their complementary players. You look at their star player, Donovan Mitchell. The guy's killing it this year. 26 points a game, 4.5 rebounds, 5.5 assists. Doing what a superstar does while averaging pretty decent average, 44% from the field. I mean, when you're shooting 20 field goals attempts a game, it starts to be extremely efficient. But 44%, that's not bad. 40% from 3, that's really solid. And then you got guys like Royce O'Neal, Bojan Bogdanovic, Joe Ingles, good complementary pieces to your, lineup. Royce O'Neal has been a very solid 3-and-D player for them. Averaging over 41% from the 3-point line while giving very solid, perimeter and even inside defense. But of course, the other two star players for this team. I mean, whatever you call them stars if you want to. Me, it's like they're co-stars. Rudy Gobert, the best inside defender in the entire NBA, and Mike Conley, who is one of the most underappreciated players in the league. I mean, this man has been, in the league for a long time, has been very good for a long time. And this season, he's averaging, for Mike Conley, 16 points a game, 5.5 assists, tied for the lead with Donovan Mitchell, with 3.5 rebounds, 1.4 steals per game. So he gives you very solid perimeter defense. He organizes the team. He's a really good, valve to, for buckets. And he's a very good piece. And then, of course, Rudy Gobert. 14.6 points, 13.3 rebounds, 2.9 blocks. I mean, what Rudy Gobert does in the paint for the Utah Jazz cannot be understated. Like, I've seen it so many times where a player will drive in. Rudy Gobert won't even, look like he's going up for a block. He'll just kind of walk into the vicinity, and they'll just instantly think, I'm not laying this up. Because they know it's going to get blocked. Because he has those kind of instincts. He's very good with his, at least in the paint, he's very good with his feet. He's good with his timing. The only thing is that he's not a great perimeter defender. Like, he's very, very bad. There's a highlight out there of like Steph Curry just making him spin around in circles, and that's what Rudy Gobert is on the outside. Inside, he's a beast, Hall of Fame type of defender. Outside, it's obviously a different story, but he's still, that's why they, keep him inside as much as possible. The only thing I have to say about this team is that if Rudy Gobert is forced to be more of an offensive threat, that's where things get very dicey here. Obviously Donovan Mitchell is going to get his. He's a star talent. Mike Conley will get his own buckets as well. But Rudy Gobert, like when he starts to get matched up with guys like Jokic, AD, who else? I mean, the Clippers don't really have anyone of that kind of talent. Like Zubac isn't like that crazy. So he probably have a decent series there. But, I mean, even a DeAndre Ayton, who's a pretty solid inside defender, like, it'll be tough for Rudy Gobert to really have a huge, what am I trying to say here? Like, a huge part in a series win for the Utah Jazz. Like, obviously, rebounding and defense, he always has that. That's always there. But they need him to be a decent offensive threat. That's just the way it is. Like, you're going to be playing a lot. You can't just be there, like, just not doing anything. You need to be an offensive threat. And averaging 14.5 points, that's not bad. But you just need to see a little bit more. But the one reason I feel like this team can certainly be a factor and a big-time, upset or surprise in the playoffs is because of their bench. Joe Ingles, Jordan Clarkson, one of the lead candidates for the 6th Man of the Year award, Derek Favors. I even like George Niang off the bench. Like, they got a pretty decent bench, much better than what the Suns have off the bench. Like, at least for the Jazz, you have a front court and backcourt player that you can easily rely on if needed in the playoffs. Like, I could easily see some late game lineups where you got Jordan Clarkson, being one of the main, offensive threats on the floor for the Utah Jazz. Kind of like to relieve some space or some pressure off of Donovan Mitchell. Because while Mike Conley, yes, he is a pretty good scorer, he's not Jordan Clarkson. Like, Jordan Clarkson has some ridiculous green light, the brightest green light that you can ask for from Coach Quinn Snyder. And I mean, and he's taken it with him. I mean, he's second in the team in points per game with 17, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, some decent defense, just under a steal a game. So he's not like, a slouch on that end. 35% from the 3-point line, 42% from the field. So, the efficiency is not there as much, but he takes the second most field goal attempts on the entire team because they rely on him heavily for the point production. And I feel like with the defense, along with the bench, I feel like that'll be the biggest X factors for the Utah Jazz. And, I mean, the Jazz have been a great defensive team for so long. That has never been an issue for them. It's whether in the playoffs, when things start getting real slow, can they still score efficiently? And, with the slew of guys that they have, Mitchell, Bogdanovich, Ingles, Conley, Clarkson, even O'Neal at times, I feel like they have enough there. I honestly believe that they can make it to a Western Conference with ease. Like, doesn't matter if they're taking on, let me at the options. You see, because if they're first, and at the moment, let's say the playoffs started right now, their second round matchup would be the Lakers or the Denver Nuggets. Now, obviously, that would be a very tough matchup, whether it was either one of those two teams, because those are two of the teams that I see as actual title contenders. So, I mean, that first round is going to be insane if it actually is to happen. But, man, it's just tough. I just don't see them beating the Lakers. That's the one. Like, Denver, I could see it happening. Like, I could see, although Rudy Gobert would have a very tough time having to guard Nikola Jokic out in the three-point line, because he's going to draw him out there. That's what's going to happen. Like, unless they play, like, two big man lineups with Derek Favors playing as a power forward, and they put him on Jokic, it would certainly be tough. But I can see the Utah Jazz getting by the Denver Nuggets. It'd be tough, but I could see it happening. But the Lakers, absolutely not. I don't think they have enough defensively on the perimeter to stop a LeBron James and to really, stop him from really just, carving the defense up in so many different ways. So, in the end, I guess I don't really see them as true title contenders or threats to LeBron and his throne there. But, I mean, I guess maybe if you put them against a Clippers team, they certainly have a chance. I mean, with the way that they play offensively and the way that they play defensively, I think it'll give the Clippers a lot of problems. So I do think they can beat the Clippers. But the Lakers, that's a different story. I just don't see that happening. So that's going to wrap it up for this segment. Make sure you guys stick around, because when I come back, I'm going to talk about the top 10 centers in the NBA this season. Right after this.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. If you missed the last segment, we talked about whether the Jazz and the Suns are serious title contenders this season. And now we're going to be talking about the top 10 centers in the NBA this year. This list was, it was a controversial list for me. There was some guys on this list I could have switched around, but I feel like once I put it all together, I really thought about it. I feel like this list is pretty solid. I'd be surprised. Well, there's some guys that I feel like you can certainly switch, but this should be your top 10 this season. I'm not considering what they've done in seasons past. I'm considering only this season. So, without further ado, let's get started with number 10. I've got Christian Wood. Now, Christian Wood is a relatively unknown player to the casual NBA fan. He, came out of nowhere last year with the Detroit Pistons, had a pretty solid season, and was considered, an up-and-coming player. At just 25 years old, he's still very young, and I'm sure the Pistons were hoping that they can sign him and kind of build around him, because he's got that kind of talent. He's a big man that can rebound really well. He can score in a variety of ways, and his defense isn't terrible. He doesn't have, he's got about league average defense. We look at his, what is he, like 1.9 steals and 1.5 blocks. So that's actually pretty decent counting stats. Let's look at those advanced numbers. He is just above average in terms of defense. So, he's got the counting stats. So, that's always good to see on paper. But overall, the best thing that Christian Wood does on the basketball court is his variety of ways in which he can score the ball. You want him in a pick and roll, get him rolling to the basket to finish hard, he can do that. He's athletic. I mean, he's averaging 21 points a game this season, just under 10 rebounds with, those steal and block numbers. He's not a big passer, 1.4 assists per game. So he's, once he gets the ball, he's going to go in for a bucket. He won't really rely on other players. Obviously, this season, he has missed a lot of time. He's missed almost half of the games this season. That's why I couldn't put him any higher. And I almost kept him off this list. I just feel like whenever he's played, he's been so productive for that Houston team. And then on top of that, the fact that when he was out, the minute he left, they went on like a 17-game losing streak. So, you could obviously tell that he impacts winning in a lot of different ways. So, he can go inside, he can score buckets inside, he can stretch the floor. He's shooting like 37% from the three-point line on about 4.5 attempts a game. Free throw shooting, there's some issues there. The past 2 seasons he was shooting around 75%, which is very solid for a big man. This year he's at 68%. So maybe it's the injuries kind of messing with him, but yeah, that's maybe the biggest issue here. Now, in my opinion, I think Christian Wood is one of the better up-and-coming bigs in the league. I feel like if he continues to grow, works his way with John Wall, and obviously John Wall is not going to be there long-term, although that contract certainly makes it feel like he will be. Christian Wood is going to be the centerpiece for that Houston Rockets team and what they do in the future, because he has that talent. So that's why I put him at number 10, and I think that's a good spot for him. The one center that he kind of beat to this spot, because the other center also has missed a lot of time, is DeAndre Ayton. I feel he hasn't missed a bunch of time, but I feel like he's having a down year. He's, 14 points per game, like 10 rebounds. I feel like Christian Wood has just done a little bit more than him in terms of just his overall game. And I feel like he's just as good a defender. So there's there's nowhere that DeAndre Ayton really beats Christian Wood. So anyways, let's move on. At number 9, I've got Miles Turner. Now, Miles Turner has like the least exciting counting stats. He's averaging about 13 points a game, 6 rebounds, and for a 6'11" athletic center to average 6 rebounds, that kind of gives me a little twitch in the eye, because I feel like centers should easily be at 8+ rebounds. And even at 8, I'm like, I should expect more, especially when you're an athletic big like Miles Turner is. However, Miles Turner, very often, he is asked to play on the perimeter. Sabonis is the one that plays inside. That's why Sabonis is averaging like almost 12 rebounds a game. Miles Turner is by far the best defensive center this season. He won the block. He was the block leader in the league in 2018-2019 season, and he's probably going to be the blocks leader this year. He's averaging about 3.5 blocks a game. That's just absolutely insane. He averaged 2.7 blocks per game that year he led the league in that category. So he's having the best season in terms of guarding the paint this year. And the thing that I always look at is it just that he's chasing for blocks, or is he actually helping the defense with these blocks? And it's the latter. He's helping the defense when he goes, he can cover a lot of ground, and he's not terrible in the perimeter. Like, obviously, you're not going to want him out there the way like a Bam Adebayo can just lock down a perimeter player, but he's still a very solid defender all around. Now, offensively, that's where he's taken a big time step. Like 2 years ago when he led the league in blocks, he was averaging shooting 39% from the 3-point line. Like, that was huge. A big that can shoot threes like that and block the way he does is crazy. But it's gone down since then. It went down to 34.5% from 3 last year to now just under 34% this year. That's not a good trend. That needs to be better. And he's shooting more threes. So maybe that's what it is, but he needs to be better on that end. He does have a 48% field goal percentage, so I guess for someone who's usually on the perimeter, that's not terrible. But he needs to be better on that end if he wants to get any higher on this list. Defensively, he's great, but he needs to do more on the offensive end to sniff any higher than 9, in my opinion, right now. At number 8, I've got Clint Capella, and I honestly don't think that someone is playing their role as good as Clint Capella is doing this season. He comes into the Atlanta Hawks from the Houston Rockets, and obviously, you know that that was a perfect fit to go along with Trae Young, a perfect pick and roll big that can, be a beast down low, get a lot of rebounds, defend the paint, and he is doing all of that at pretty much top of the league type of level right now. 15 points per game, 14 rebounds to lead the league. On top of that, he's got 2.2 blocks a game. The man is absolutely owning the paint this season for the Atlanta Hawks, and I cannot let that go unnoticed. It's just been incredible from what I've seen from Clint Capella. I almost put him higher. Like, I had him 7 on my list. There's this guy that's ahead of him now that I just could not put behind Clint Capella because it wouldn't have felt right to me. Maybe that is the way I should have gone, but I just didn't do it. So Clint Capella comes in at number 8 just because of, just how good he is at playing his role. It's an efficient scorer inside who rebounds, defends, knows his role, and does it at an elite level. So Clint Capella comes in at number 8. At number 7, we've got Kristaps Porzingis. Now, Kristaps Porzingis has dealt with some injuries this season. He dealt with an injury early on in the year. I think he missed like 9 games to start the year. And it took him a little bit to get into a rhythm. However, over the past few weeks, or I guess over the past couple games, he has been playing at that level that you would expect Kristaps Porzingis to play at. A big man that can shoot the 3 ball very well. He's shooting it at 37% this season, but it's been, trending upwards, while also being a very solid shot blocker. And a shot blocker that can cover a lot of ground. He's not athletic. He's not as athletic as he was before the knee injury, which is obvious. That's very common. But he is still a very athletic big. Sometimes when I look at him, he looks like a little slower, but he's still a very good player. He can score in a number of ways. You want him in the post, he can do that. He's 7'2", for crying out loud. 7'3", actually. So, he is a huge, huge guy who can also step out and shoot the 3 ball and protect the paint for you. I loved the pairing of him and Luka Doncic. Obviously, he needs to do a little bit better. You need him to be that second star if the Dallas Mavericks seriously want to contend for a title. But he's working his way back. Obviously, he's been dealing with a bad injury. What do you have? He tore his ACL. That you do not just come back from that and are fine. And last year, he dealt with a couple injuries as well. So he is still a 20-point-per-game scorer, very good defender in the paint, and I expect him to be, on these types of lists for years to come. So Kristaps Porzingis comes in at number 7. At number 6, I have someone who normally would have been considered for a top 5, top 4 spot on this list, but he's dealt with injuries this season, and he just does not win games. And I really take that into consideration, and that is Karl Anthony Towns. The man is as talented as they come at the center position. Scores in pretty much any way you possibly need. One of the best 3-point shooting bigs in the game today. And he's very athletic, so he's not a slouch on defense. He's not the highest, IQ-wise on defense, but he's got all the potential to be an MVP candidate. Honestly, he can do pretty much anything you want him to do. But he just doesn't produce winning basketball. Like, there was literally a moment at a game he played recently. I forgot who it was against. I really cannot remember the team he was playing. But he got a rebound late in the game. And the smart thing to do when you're the biggest man on the floor with only 6 seconds left in the game and his team had the lead was hold it, get fouled. You're not a bad free throw shooter. He shoots 86% from the free throw line and knock both of them down and end the game. He passes it to a teammate that was right in front of him with literally the entire team surrounding them. Even the commentator was like, what is Karl doing? And that has kind of been what has kind of characterized Karl Anthony Towns' career. Him not being able to make the right plays and not being able to win his team, get his team wins on a consistent basis. This year, obviously, with the injuries, the Minnesota Timberwolves were out of the playoff spot by the time he even came back. But even now, hopefully with Anthony Edwards they can do something. But Karl Anthony Towns just does not produce winning basketball. I mean, an immense talent, which is why I couldn't put him any lower than 6. It's just not possible to put Karl Anthony Towns lower than 6. I probably should have put him 5th because he's that talented. But I can't. It's just hard. It's really hard because of just what he hasn't contributed to anything. The only time he's made it to the playoffs was when Jimmy Butler was on his team. And you arguably can say that was the only reason they did. Because he had the same kind of season that he normally does, averaging like 25 and 10, which is what he's been averaging for almost his entire career now. But it's just been a struggle for him from day one. And now he's been dealing with injuries. Like the first 3 years of his career, 4 years, I guess, he missed a total of 5 games. Now he's only played, what is that, 67 games in the last 2 years. That is not a great trend for Karl Anthony Towns. Hopefully he can stay healthy and try to get Minnesota Timberwolves back on the map. At number 5, I have one of the best offensive centers in the entire league, Nikola Vucevic. He is having a career year, averaging 24 points a game, 11.5 rebounds, almost 4 assists on 48% shooting from the field, 40% from 3, 84% from the free throw line. I mean, he does it all for the Orlando Magic, and I honestly feel bad for him because he gets... I mean, obviously this year, the Orlando Magic have been ravaged by injuries. Markelle Fultz, Jonathan Isaac, both out before the season even started. They were out for the year. So at that point, his best complementary pieces were Dwayne Bacon, Aaron Gordon, Evan Fournier. Like, that's garbage. You know, when you're considering those guys as your second or third best players, like, that's not good at all. So, you know, he did everything he could. Like, there were games when he was literally just carrying this team to losses. Like, he was shooting super efficient, doing everything he possibly could, while the other team literally shooting like 30% from the field. There's really not much you can do with that. Now he's on the Bulls, so let's see if he can, help this team get to the playoffs and do something, because now he's matched up with Zach LaVine, probably the best player he's ever played with, and it'll be very interesting to see how they match up together. But Vucevic can just do pretty much anything you need him to on the offensive end. He can pass the ball well, shoot the three, post up, whatever you want, he can do it. So the only thing would probably be that he's not like the most athletic person, but I mean, regardless, he makes it work with what he's got. Nikola Vucevic comes in at number 5. At number 4, I have the best inside defender in, I'm not going to say league history, but one of them is Rudy Gobert. I got Rudy Gobert at number 4. I mean, this man, every single season is like clockwork. Just getting ridiculous amounts of blocks inside, making Utah Jazz a top 5 defense in the league. And for the most part, it's all because of him. His ability to just lock down that paint, nobody wanting to go inside. And if they do, they're going to meet the French wall. Like, that's just facts. Rudy Gobert is that kind of player. Like, you cannot... You just can't go at him. It just doesn't work that way. You cannot do it. And the only knock on him is that he hasn't expanded his offensive game in any way. He rolls to the basket. He's a huge guy. What is it, 7'1", 260 pounds. So he's huge. But he doesn't really have any post moves. At least none consistent enough that you can really go at him on a regular basis. He's more of a pick and roll guy. Someone that's kind of like cleans up, offensive rebounds, putbacks. That's pretty much all he does on the offensive end. And he's not a crazy passer. He's only averages 1.3 assists this season, 1.4 for his career. But what he does at an elite level. Rebound and play inside defense like you would never believe. I mean, if you've watched the game, against the Utah Jazz, that's what he does. So, I mean, Rudy Gobert comes in at number 4, and I just couldn't put it any higher because he's not a versatile center. And I love versatile centers. That's what we're going to get in the next 3 picks. At number 3, we have my man, Bam Adebayo. And I mean, the rise has been clear from day one, in my opinion. Like, I saw him play as a rookie, and I knew. I was telling my friends from day one, watch out with Bam Adebayo. I mean, just his versatility, his ability to guard all 5 positions, and now he's shown, like, even his rookie season, he showed the ability to to pass the ball very well. But I wasn't expecting like this, like, him being like one of the best passing centers in the entire league. Like, you can probably put him second best passing center in the entire league. If you don't consider Sabonis a center, which obviously he's a power forward this season, that's why he was on my power forward list, you put Bam Adebayo as the second best passer behind Nikola Jokic at the center position. He's technically a point center. And on top of that, he's got athleticism on top of what, Nikola Jokic has. Like he's just not as refined offensively as Jokic. Defensively, in my opinion, he is the best defender on this list. The best defender. I think he's better than Rudy Gobert because he's not as good inside as Gobert. Obviously, Gobert swats away everything. Same thing as Miles Turner. He's not as good as that. But he is a very good rim protector while also being able to guard your best guard with no problem. Bradley Beal, he's done it. Steph Curry, no problem. Obviously they're gonna get, they're gonna get him a few times. I mean, these are the best guards in the entire world. But if there's anybody that you would be perfectly okay with guarding a perimeter player, it would be Bam Adebayo. His quickness, his agility, his length, it all causes problems for these scoring guards. And I'm every single time, I'm telling you, every time I see a guard think that he can take on Bam Adebayo after he got a switch on him, I'm like, please, I'm begging you, go for it. Because Bam Adebayo is going to have clamps on that all day, every day. And the fact that now he's expanding his offensive game, that game against Brooklyn this year, if you guys haven't seen Bam Adebayo's game against Brooklyn, please look that up. You're going to see what he can turn into. He has, I don't want to say MVP potential, because, he needs to take a few more leaps. The thing is, he's only 23 years old, and he's already taken a few leaps that I wasn't expecting from him. So it is possible, but I don't want to jinx it and put it out there and it not happen. So Bam Adebayo, a do-it-all guy, the future of the NBA, like in terms of the center position, comes in at number 3. At number 2, and I gotta also say, these next two, the gap in skill kind of takes it up a notch because these two guys are MVP candidates. At number 2, I got Nikola Jokic. Obviously, we know at number 1, we have Joel Embiid. I'm gonna just, whatever, spoil, because if you didn't know, I mean, like, come on. But like, the reason I'm saying that is because these two guys you can interchange at any point. It really all comes down to preference. Who do you want on your team? Nikola Jokic or Joel Embiid? And I know Jokic, with his ability to pass the ball, I mean, the man's almost averaging a triple-double this season. 26 points per game, 11 rebounds, 8 assists on ridiculous efficiency. 57% from the field, 43% from 3, 87% from the free throw line. I mean, the man can do it all on the offensive end. And defensively, he's not terrible. 1.5 steals a game, leads the team. Like I said in the first segment, or second segment, just behind Aaron Gordon, who has 1.7 in the last 3 games. But you're talking about overall season, he's the leader in steals. So, I mean, he can do it all. It really comes down to preferences for me. I just prefer Joel Embiid because I think he's more versatile on both sides of the court. I'm not a fan of Jokic on the defensive end. Like, when it really comes down to it, I don't feel like he can really lock down, like, anybody. Like, if you're talking about a really dominant offensive center, which there really isn't much. But, like, let's just say if he got matched up against Joel Embiid, I feel like Joel Embiid would kind of score all day, every day on him. Whether it's the three-point line, inside, the middle mid-range that Joel Embiid has, I think he would score. Obviously, Jokic, offensively, there's nobody that really matches up with him because of all the different things that he can do. But defensively, he's just not as good there. Like, I go and look at the advanced numbers, and I always look at the defensive win shares. And it's like, offensively, it's at 8.4, which leads the league this season. And it's the best he's ever had in his career. 2.3 on the defensive end. Like, again, he's not a bad defender. But if we're talking about, like, what I would prefer, I prefer a guy who can be, not as good offensively, but still a very good offensive center. but can also carry you on the defensive end. And that is Joel Embiid at number 1. If he had stayed healthy, it would have been a battle for who would win the MVP this season. I mean, the man is averaging 30 points per game, 11.5 rebounds, 3.3 assists, which is obviously where, Jokic really has the advantage there on the offensive end, but also on crazy efficiency. 52.5% percent from the field, 42% from 3, 86% from the free throw line. Like, the man is a bucket, but he can also give it to you on defense. 1.2 steals per game, 1.4 blocks per game, which is actually down for him, really. And, I mean, it's just the fact that he can do all those things on the offensive end while also being a force defensively. It's tough. I mean, the fact that Jokic can certainly, take over a game with his offense and his ability to just change a game with his passing, it's tough. But I just would personally go with Joel Embiid because of just how versatile he is on both ends of the floor. But again, I would not be surprised if someone had Jokic number 1 and Joel Embiid number 2. That's how close these two guys are in terms of skill. So that's going to wrap it up for this segment. As always, thank you for listening to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really helps us. Also, if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, I would really appreciate it. Thank you and have a great night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.